Dungeon crawling meets farming sim meets dating sim, all in a fantasy world. That's the Rune Factory formula. It's a Harvest Moon spin-off series with a cult following, of which I am a part of. And it recently came out with its 7th installment, Rune Factory 5. Yes, I said that right. And to be clear right off the bat, each game is a self-contained story with no connection to each other, so you can very easily start with number 5 as your first Rune Factory game. And that's what I'd recommend if you're interested in the series. It's my favorite game I've played all year. No, I have not played Elden Ring, not really my vibe. I'm making this video because I have 90 plus hours in the game. Thoroughly enjoyed it, but my first impressions of the game were so bad that I was almost deterred from playing it entirely. And I want to encourage those who are unsure about the game to maybe give it a try, if you're willing to look past some glaring quality issues. If you aren't, that's understandable. So without further ado, here's my review of Rune Factory 5. Let's start with those first impressions. I need to get this off my chest. Early on in the game, you are introduced to the town of Rigbarth and your very own farm, and it's underwhelming, honestly. This small patch of dirt surrounded by emptiness is my farm. This kiddie pool looking thing is my water well. The town's big, but for no reason. There's so many areas that don't need to exist that are literally just completely devoid of details, especially the paths toward the dungeon. They go on forever and have absolutely nothing to look at. Like, what's the point? Thankfully, the game has fast travel, so you can usually just avoid those particular paths. But the town... It's like they did that Photoshop function where you just add extra space between everything for breathing room, but this isn't a graphic design, it's a video game, and it's really annoying to have to walk so far to get anywhere, and not even have any pretty details to look at while doing it. Oh hey, the pretty cherry blossom trees from the trailer. Yeah, this area looks kinda nice, and it looks kinda weird and out of place compared to everything else in town. Thankfully, in my opinion, the other seasons look a lot better, so it's a shame that spring kinda looks the worst. It's everyone's first impression of the game. Okay, hi. 100-hour Kiki chiming in here because I made it back to spring, and I honestly don't dislike it as much as I did before. I think a big part of it was just me getting used to the visuals and the game growing on me in general, and I'm the kind of person who can look past graphics pretty easily. But yeah, back to the complaining. And why is this town laid out like an Animal Crossing town where every building faces the same direction? We have full camera control in this, and normal towns aren't like that? The previous 2 console 3D Rune Factory games came out on the Wii 11 plus years ago, and I much prefer the town layout in these. You see how some of the buildings face different directions or are on an angle, and the doors face toward a central area like a nice inviting town. The towns were smaller than Rigbarth, the resolution wasn't as good, but every inch had artistic detail that made them immersive. Bigger doesn't always mean better. A bigger, more open world is only a good thing if each area is interesting. Rigbarth is unfortunately just a pain to traverse and doesn't feel like an immersive, cozy town to me. The details that do exist take a while to load in. Sometimes my farm doesn't want to load. The whole town has the same music playing, every interior besides your house has the same kind of meh music that gets super repetitive. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. What I look for in a game like this is a cozy, happy, immersive experience that makes me feel at home. I didn't get that right away, so I almost put the game down. But clearly I didn't. And that's because this game has so much content, so much character, so much heart, that it did give me that warm, cozy, immersive feel. And all that stuff I just complained about really was just bad first impressions. And a lot of those things I disliked got better, a lot better. But the town's layout still kinda stinks, unfortunately. Okay, now let's get into the actual gameplay and content of Rune Factory 5. How about we get out of the town and start with combat and dungeons? Oh hey, the dungeons actually look pretty cool, and a lot of them have awesome soundtracks. The monsters look great and adorable. Turns out this game's pretty cool. The game's story will send you to several different themed areas, all with a lot to explore. Combat is hack and slash action RPG style. Relatively simple, lots of button mashing, but you actually get a lot of choice in how you approach combat. There are 8 different unique weapon types. My favorite is the fist weapons, which adds some variety to the button mashing by giving me options like picking up opponents and slamming them into the ground or tossing them into each other. There's also a lot of magic rune abilities. You can customize your menu menu to include all your favorites. You can tame any monster, including bosses eventually, and you can ride many of the monsters into combat, or just fight alongside them. You can invite almost every villager to be a party member, up to 3 additional party members at a time, and they each have their preferred weapon or magic type. You can do all these cool link attacks with your party members, which is super helpful for taking down bosses. Don't expect the complexity of Zelda puzzles or Xenoblade attacks from this game. It's nice, simple fun that isn't meant to be too complicated. In my experience, most of the strategy comes from the crafting aspect of the game, so let's get into that next. Rune Factory 5 has a really fun crafting mechanic. You learn crafting recipes by eating bread from the bakery, which is just the kind of weird and charming thing that I've come to expect from Rune Factory. Like, it's just a normal thing in this world. You don't learn from reading a book or anything. You learn from bread. Just let the carbs enlighten you. Grinding to raise your crafting skill is maybe the least fun part, but it's pretty rewarding when you finally start learning really good recipes, or really random ones. Upgrading your weapons and armor with rare materials that you find around the dungeon allow you to customize its stats and effects to your liking. Do you want a magic potato rod that shoots sweet potatoes at enemies and poisons them on contact or puts them to sleep? You can do that. You can do whatever you want, and it gives you a lot of freedom to approach difficult enemies in any way that you like. And of course, you can equip any of these weapons and armor to your favorite party members as well. Give everyone a pumpkin head. Happy Halloween. Let's talk about characters. Characters are super important to me because they're what really makes me feel immersed in a story and an experience. There's such a unique variety of townspeople in Rune Factory 5 that you're bound to find someone that you like. Yuki and Randolph, the adorable older couple sharing stories of their past adventures while offering you those educational baked goods. Delightful. Misasagi, Hina, and Murakumo's wholesome werewolf family dynamic. Lovely. Joyous joy! I aspire to have Palmo's levels of energy, confidence in his wacky ideas, dedication to his craft. I mean, absolute king. And as is standard for Rune Factory, the game features gorgeous anime-style character portraits, and even the 3D models of the characters look pretty darn good, though they've got a bit of that soulless Pokemon character eyes going on. I do wish there was more voice acting, though. I guess I'm a bit spoiled by Fire Emblem Three Houses. The romance options are, I think, pretty good. I kind of agree with the criticism about some of the characters looking a bit too childlike and some of the older characters being off limits, but I think there's plenty of options that are a great fit for the main character, and lots of variety to choose from, especially since this is the first installment in the Rune Factory series to allow same-sex romance. Finally, that's something the game did not initially have upon release in Japan, but the localization team fought hard for it to be added, and it's so great to see them succeed. I no longer have to choose my character's gender based on my very first impressions of each limited pool of romanceable characters. What's kind of amusing about this to me is you can't avoid gay storylines if you try. Like, the romance stories are auto-triggered in central areas of the map. All the characters are gonna be having little romances with you, blushing when they look your way. There was definitely a romance story that was like, choose a girl to kiss. I kind of wonder what it's like playing the game as a straight person now, like being forced into the gay romance stories. Imagine that. The topic of romance representation in video games is so interesting to me that I might make a whole video about it at some point. The most important thing is that everyone has as much choice as possible when it comes to who to date and who to marry, and it's more fun that way anyway. Obviously, other forms of representation have a long way to go, with the characters being thin and light-skinned. It's par for the course for a lot of anime-style stories, but still worth mentioning. I can only speak for the marriage candidate that I chose, which was Riker, but I think that the dates are pretty well done, like giving you a lot of story and depth to the characters, in addition to the fluffy romantic goodness. I kinda wish the dating was more like Rune Factory 3 though, where you weren't entering a committed relationship, but just taking characters on dates. I really wanted to see the other characters' stories, but I didn't want to cheat on Riker. Even though there's no repercussions to having multiple partners, it just feels wrong. The game's got a lot of will they, won't they, like embarrassed romantic hinting kind of vibe, which is kind of funny and weird to see once you're like in a committed relationship with the person. There was an amusing side story that happened featuring like my 3 favorite romance candidates playing like a spicy truth or dare style game, but I was already married to Riker at the time that it triggered, and if you know the scene, then you know why that's hilariously weird. While I'm on the topic of side events, I really wish it was possible to skip to nighttime in the game, because some side events events only happen at night, and each day is pretty long. It takes almost like a half an hour in real life to get to nighttime, which is okay because there's a lot to do with your day, and you do regenerate your stamina over time, so you can keep doing stuff. But sometimes I just want to skip ahead, so I wish that you could do that at the inn or something like that. Plus, the nighttime music is nice and I want to hear it more. So let's get into story. The story is not too deep, and it doesn't have to be, in my opinion. It's standard fantasy trope fun, you know, good versus evil, with some light twists and turns and surface level moral questions along the way. Your character has amnesia, which lends itself well to the idea of starting a new life and settling into a brand new town. You join this group called the Seed Rangers, protecting your cozy town from danger, and you have a unique connection to the earth and nature's energy, which comes through with your farming. When the future of that rune energy is at stake, you've got to go to a bunch of dungeons and fight a bunch of things. That's basically the gist of it without spoiling. But I would actually compare this game to like Breath of the Wild. I know that sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. Both games have a very basic, straightforward story that's nothing special. But what is special is the stories that you yourself create and imagine as you play the game however you wish. The stories of you and your unique battle party bonding and exploring, befriending monsters, participating in the town's festivals, forming relationships. Everyone's experience playing this game is going to be a little bit different based on how you approach it and what just happens to play out. For example, the very first time I fainted in the dungeon happened to be on the same day my character was just about to have her first date. That's a story. I mean, I'd love to make like a comic about the main character being flustered and distracted and then getting run over by a herd of Buffamoo. Or for another example, when I was having trouble with the final dungeon, I realized that I had to grind my crafting skill and make really good equipment. So I spent like an in-game week just eating bread, crafting myself nearly to death, going to the bathhouse to recover stamina, crafting again, sleeping, and repeat. So basically, Murakumo and the bakery folks are the only people in town who saw the main character for a week, and they probably saw her looking super beat up from overexertion. So you gotta wonder what types of rumors would be going around town at that time. The point is, in my opinion, sometimes the best stories are the ones that you create or imagine yourself when immersed in a game. Or maybe I'm just a weirdo, I don't know. Now let's talk about the farming. Take my opinions on this with a grain of salt because I've never played Stardew Valley, Story of Seasons, or literally any farming game other than Rune Factory, so I don't really know what's unique and what's not. What I can say is that I really enjoy the farming in this game. Similar to the crafting, it's very satisfying to level up your crops, get more and more seed types available to you, and slowly build multiple self-sustaining farms thanks to your friendly monster buddies helping you out. It's also satisfying to craft better and better farming tools to get the job done quicker, or nutrients to improve your yield or growth speed, or make your crops super big. And there's these rare shooting star seeds that give you cool, giant, starry crops, which I think is awesome. Chopping wood and stones does get very repetitive, and so does petting and gifting all your monsters so that they like you enough to do chores. Sometimes this repetitive gameplay can be sort of nice and therapeutic and chill, but I'll be honest, most of the time it's kind of annoying. But the nice thing about all the aspects of this game is everything's pretty much optional. You can take any form of progression at your own pace, and usually ignoring a part of the game isn't punishing at all. Your monsters aren't going to die if you don't feed them. The world isn't going to end if you stop going to the dungeons or you stop farming. You don't have to care about crop level. You don't have to get married. I personally think that fishing is super boring, so I never fish except when there's a contest. But if a sense of progression and accomplishment is what motivates you in a game, there's so much here. Requests to complete, achievements to earn, so many skills to level up. The amount of content in this game is super impressive, and I think anyone can find an element of it to get hooked on. Heck, this is the only Rune Factory game that I've bothered to play after the story is complete and I'm married. Like, there's still so much to do. So those are just some of my thoughts on Rune Factory 5 after 90 plus hours. Let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my points, or if you're considering trying the game yourself. This is the first game review video I've done. I just kind of felt compelled to do so because I have so many thoughts on this game and no one to talk to about it, so feel free to chat with me in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye! Also, can I just say going from playing Animal Crossing Happy Home Paradise to this is a bit sad. Like, what is this furniture system? It's like too much freedom and not enough at the same time. God forbid you put a chair close to its table, but gotta have that realism of wanting things to line up, but instead the angle is off ever so slightly and it bothers you every time you look at it. Gotta love Rune Factory.